for a look at how Beijing has been hosting the Games and the economics behind the Olympics. We're now joined by Patrick Rishe. He's the director of the Sports Business Program at Washington University in St. Louis. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Elaine.
Well, Patrick, we're coming to the end of the Winter Games this weekend. I want to get your thoughts on how you think Beijing handled its host duties, the logistics, especially during this pandemic.
Well, under the circumstances, I think they, in terms of operationally, I thought that they did a fine job with the closed loop circuit, kind of mimicking what we saw with the NBA and the NHL when they came back from the pandemic. It's a difficult circumstance, obviously, obviously we were all having to deal with in various aspects of the sports industry. So from that standpoint, I think that they did a fine job.
Tokyo Summer Games just about 6 months ago. Was there a lot learned from that experience and applied to how Beijing was approaching their last-minute planning? And is it even fair to compare summer and winter games in this way?
Well, they're certainly different, but I think the lessons that you can learn from the fact that Tokyo just recently did host the games under a pandemic condition. And as I said, we have these other sports to learn from and leagues to learn from, such as the NBA's and the NHL's experience in 2020, Tokyo's experience in the summer of 21. So all of these things, I think, definitely helped put Beijing in a better chance to operationally handle these games as well as they could.
Let's talk about the cost for hosting for some of these countries, the pros and the cons. We know that the next 3 summer host cities are lined up, only 2 for the next winter games. Why are fewer cities bidding than in years past, or so it seems that way?
Well, certainly when you look at the fact that Beijing, just the sheer fact that they hosted this year is definitely a function of the fact that when they were awarded the bid some 7, 8, 9 years ago, this was a period where you had a lot of cities that just did not want to bid because of various rising costs. I think part of it is the infrastructural cost. Cities feel that they have to revamp and improve their transportation systems. The stadium cost is a huge cost for many of these cities, and we don't want to see, the IOC certainly going forward doesn't want to see these white elephants, these stadiums that don't get utilized afterward, that lack the sustainability. So we don't want to see these dilapidated stadiums just months after the games, as we saw in Rio and in Athens and in Sochi. So that is one thing that the IOC put into effect, their Reform Agenda 2020, where they want more cost minimization, risk minimization, and greater sustainability going forward. And I do think when we start seeing future bid cycles for summer and winter games, because of these effects, we are going to hopefully see more cities come in and bid.
Could we see some changes to the Olympics in the future because of the challenges that come with hosting? And what I mean by that is, you know, Beijing wanted these to be the green games. They wanted to be the first host city to really make things sustainable. Could we see future host cities make changes along those lines? And what will they take from this experience?
Well, absolutely. And what you just mentioned is certainly in line with the IOC's Agenda 2020, as they call it, where it's a hundreds-page manuscript where they have 40 recommendations, and the sustainability piece is certainly one of those. So I think, part of it, too, is before in the past when you're bidding on these games, all the hoops that countries and cities had to jump through, where you're flying all over the world, you're meeting with delegates, you've got to make multiple trips to kind of impress folks. There was a lot of unnecessary costs that were incurred in the past. So I think that's one thing that I hope going forward will be reduced, and therefore encourage more cities to get involved. But we want to spread the Olympics around. We want to spread other events like the World Cup around. And yet at the same time, I think when you step back, I know the IOC is extremely excited that you have cities like Paris in 24 and Los Angeles in 28 that are going to be hosting. They feel good about that stability that you referenced earlier, Elaine. And so the question is, should we have some kind of a rotational cycle where you've got 5 or 6 cities globally that at the end of the day are probably the best qualified to host, respectively, a summer and winter games? I think, me personally, that's a great way to reduce costs because that takes the uncertainty out of it. But I think the IOC likes the idea of spreading the wealth. And so as long as they do that, we'll still have a bid cycle for these games.
Patrick Rishe, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Elaine.